So in this video, we're going to talk about the flow. Now the flow is a patented game mechanic and makes Ophidian 2350 unique, completely different from all other games. In fact, if someone was to ask me why I recommend Ophidian 2350 over other games, it would be because of this mechanic. So in traditional games, you have a normal turn sequence. Somebody takes a turn, then the next person takes a turn, somebody takes a turn, then the next person takes a turn. It can get very monotonous. And in an actual combat scenario, you would never have that situation. So if two guys got swords and they're facing off against each other, you're not going to have one guy whack one guy with a sword, then he waits for the other guy to whack him, and then he whacks him back. That just doesn't represent actual combat in a real-world scenario. So the flow does something that, again, most games can't do, which is to give more realism to an actual combat scenario. So they do away with traditional turns that we've just discussed, and they use a concept called the flow. So in the flow, the cards themselves and the actions that you can do with your gladiators determine who is going and who is waiting to go. And the way this works is that each of the actions, such as attacking and defending or retreating, have an indicator both on the cards or something in the rule book that tells you whether it's a positive or negative action. So you're going to see symbols, such as these symbols here, on each card, which indicate whether that will let you keep the flow, or whether it will let you lose the flow, or whether it's a reaction to something that has happened in the game. So the simple way of putting it is that if you're doing positive actions, such as attacking, or playing positive cards, such as this positive card here on this minion, or this positive card here with this lung spore card, this pump, or this positive card with the minion, you'd be able to train these cards in kind of a combination. So you could summon this minion, and then play lung spores on your opponents, and then summon another minion. And then you could move a gladiator forward and attack, etc. As long as you're doing positive actions, you can continue to play one card after another and do one action after another and build really unique combinations of moves. Now, once you play a card that is a negative action, such as this portaled heist, you have then effectively lost the flow, and then your opponent then gets the flow and starts there what you would call a turn. And they also would be able to play positive cards and do positive actions in combinations. Now, in addition to positives and negatives that you see on the cards themselves, you may also see cards that have a little question mark like this guy down here in the bottom. What this means is that this card is undetermined. So there's something on the card that would tell you whether the card is positive or negative. In the case of this experimental magenta pill, you would roll a die, a d6, and then on a 1 or a 2, this is what would happen, and it would be positive. On a 3 and 4, this is what would happen, it would be positive, and on a 5 and 6, this is what would happen, it would be negative. So again, a question mark just means that you have to look at the text to determine whether that card will be positive or negative. Let me throw another card out here real quick. We're going to pull magenta out. And we're going to pull in this next card here. This is our suffocation card. Again, it has that little question mark there indicating that it's undetermined. So we would have to read the text. So this text basically says, destroy target pump with this many credit points of play cost on an opponent's character. If you control 2 or more spectral gladiators, then it's positive. Otherwise, it's considered negative. So again, the question mark means the flow is undetermined until you've done something on the text. Now there's 3 other types of cards out there, and we're going to talk briefly about them. These are reaction cards. And what that means is that something has to happen in order for you to play these cards. So this card, the OR, is called an offensive reaction. And you can play offensive reactions while you have the flow. So while you're playing these cards that are positive or doing something positive, you would whip out your offensive reaction and play it. Now, if you look at the text, it will tell you what that actual offensive reaction is. So in the case of Mind Lash, it says after a character you control deals damage, etc., etc., etc. So in this case, the action that would have to occur prior to playing this card is that one of your characters would have to deal damage. Then you could play this OR card as an offensive response. And again, you would play this card while you have the flow. You could only play this card while you have the flow. Next up is the DR, or defensive response. Now, the defensive response card is played when you don't have the flow. Now, this doesn't stop people from training cards. It simply allows you to kind of interject this card into the midst. So in this case, the DR, or defensive response, would occur after something happens to you, as indicated by the text. So for this card here, it says, after a gladiator you control takes damage. So the minute that happens, you could then play this card as a defensive response, and whatever it says on the text would then occur. Now, this card, again, does not interrupt the flow. It simply is a little bitty, like an intermediary card. And after the card is played, the person that has the flow can still continue to play cards. And last up is the plain old just R card. This is the reaction card. This guy right here has the little R in the corner. Now, the reaction card can be played at any time. It doesn't matter whether you have the flow or whether you don't have the flow. The only thing that matters is that you have to read the text to find out when you can play this card. So in this case, it simply says, after target gladiator retreats. So anytime a target gladiator retreats, could be yours or an opponent, you can whip this card out as a reaction. Again, it doesn't matter if you have the flow or not. And it says they take 1 undefensible damage. So then, again, this gives you the complete set of things that you can do. Again, playing positive cards means you have the flow and you can continue to do positive things such as attacking, advancing, all that good stuff. You can play offensive reaction cards while you're doing all these positive things, but something has to happen in order to play an offensive reaction. And the text will typically tell you what that is. Question mark cards means it's undetermined. You're taking a risk every time you're playing them because you don't know whether it could cause you to keep the flow or lose it. Defensive reaction cards occur whenever you don't have the flow, and you can spend them at any time when something happens according to the text. So again, the text will indicate when you can play the card, but you can only play this card when you do not have the flow. And then reaction cards, again, following the text, can be played at any time, regardless of whether you have the flow or you don't. Well, that's the end of this video. I hope that I've explained the flow to you, and I hope you enjoy this really unique game mechanic.